So Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, gave the opening keynote address yesterday at DICE. And I wanted to talk about it for a little bit, to give my thoughts on it, summarize it for you guys, for those of you who didn't get to check it out. Phil talked about how he wants game companies to embrace inclusivity. He talked about how he wants to fight toxic biases that make women and other minorities feel unwelcome in the online gaming space. He talked about Xbox and how he went through the struggle of trying to change some of the culture there. And I think it was a pretty interesting speech. I highly recommend you check it out. So let's talk about it. What is going on, guys? Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. And really quickly, make sure you check out my previous video about the MPD for January. A lot of good information there, so check it out when you got the time. Now, really quickly, I want to address some of the concerns I see from people who thought that Phil's speech here would be him announcing new games for the Xbox platform or announcing new studios. Well, that's not what DICE is all about. You're probably more looking forward to GDC or E3 at that point in time. And honestly, I don't even know why people thought this was going to be a speech about that, considering the title of his speech was Building a Living and Learning Company Culture with Phil Spencer. So I don't know why anybody particularly thought that he was going to be announcing new exclusive games. Those are for the trade shows, whether the technology at GDC or the actual one where they do announce new stuff at E3. But I've seen that misconception floating around, and I wanted to say, really, guys? Come on, you're better than that. And honestly, he wasn't even really talking, because I've seen this misconception floating around too, that this was all just console war stuff, that Phil was talking about the console war. No, he wasn't. He was talking more about the toxicity that lives on in online gaming. Now, I use party chat all the time on Xbox these days. I have it since they introduced it, because game chat can be really particularly toxic and horrible to listen to, especially if you're a minority, like an African American or a woman. Man, if someone finds out you are black, here come the N-words and all the different types of slurs. If someone finds out you're a woman, man, all the different stereotypes come into play. Get back in the kitchen, make me a sandwich, all that stuff. It's a toxic environment, and that was what Phil was talking about. But that was just one of the things. Now, yeah, some people weren't happy that, once again, Phil talked about, in glowing praise too, about Zelda and about Uncharted. But he was making a point that game companies excel at creating these amazing worlds, right? And he highlighted one each from a particular company, mainly Nintendo and Sony, which are his competitors, and some people are upset about that. But once again, if you're upset about Phil standing in front of a screen that shows Uncharted and him talking about it, same thing with Zelda, you should probably reevaluate your feelings towards this stuff. If that makes you upset about the head of Xbox, talking about how gaming is amazing, how gaming creates all these amazing worlds, and he talks about Halo, but you're cool with that because it's his game, but you get upset when he brings up Zelda, a game that was around before Microsoft entered the video game business, and Uncharted, you might want to reevaluate a little bit, because it's talk about gaming in general and how to get rid of all this toxic biasness within it. So the interesting thing here, it's great to see Phil's viewpoint when it comes to these certain topics, because sometimes, for a lot of the heads of these companies really don't know how they feel about certain things. These are just names at the head of a company that get paid millions of dollars and provide a service for us. Like, we don't really truly know how a lot of the heads of these companies feel, but Phil went out of his way, and you could tell from the way he was talking about it, the way he was, it felt impassioned to me. It felt that Phil actually believes what he's saying, that he does want to change the toxic behavior online, because it's not good for society, it's not good for gaming, and it's not good for business. So it's always interesting to get always a peek behind the curtain of these CEOs at companies. Now, he also talked about how, I mean, it was very much a speech about the parallels between virtual worlds and successful and inclusive company cultures. He talked about how Microsoft had their own struggles when Satya Nadella took over. The company underwent a major cultural refresh, and Phil's been at Xbox for a long, not just Xbox, but at Microsoft in general for a long time. He said that morale was at an all-time low. And you guys remember the memes where you'd have the different sections of leadership. You know, you'd have one group here, one group here, one group here, and they're all pointing guns at one another. And he actually addressed that. You know, that there was those infighting and those fiefdoms, and at that time, Microsoft, the culture at Microsoft wasn't great, and it took a lot for them to hit the refresh button to turn it from a know-it-all culture, which is what they thought they had, to a learn-it-all culture. And specifically with Xbox, he talked about the failures of the Xbox One launch, right? He said that we hadn't done our best with the launch of the Xbox One. Market share was taking a nosedive. And on top of that, the employees felt that leadership seemed tone-deaf to what customers wanted. Now, 2013 has been beaten to death. People know what happened. But Phil's come out there and saying, listen, even the people who worked on Xbox at the time thought that the leadership team were just out of touch with what the regular people wanted. Of course, you can maybe attribute some of that to the previous management, Don Matrick and his buddies, that ran Xbox into the ground, in my opinion, despite a contingent of gamers out there wanting Donnie D to come back. But I never understood that because he was never good for Xbox. But yeah, I mean, imagine that. Here you have it, the head of Xbox saying when he took over and had an all-hands meeting that the team, the ones who build Xbox itself, Xbox Live, some of the games at first party, all the accessories, they didn't have any more trust in the company itself, in the leadership team. So he had to do some of the things to change that culture around. He shared some confidential information, which he didn't say what it was. He said it didn't leak either, so people were excited, and that was the start of turning around the Xbox. Because this is as much of a speech about being a leader at a company and trying to affect change as much as it was about the toxic biases and wanting to change that. He talked about empathy and trust. He said you got to listen and address the worries of the team and trust them. And once you have that trust, it goes both ways. Another thing he talked about is accountability. Now, he specifically mentioned that party at GDC 2016 that featured scantily clad dancers on tabletops, and there was a backlash, right? Some said Microsoft shouldn't have apologized for that, or that Phil shouldn't have, because there's no way he hired those dancers himself. I mean, he is just the head of the company. He delegates, positions of power and authority beneath him to do everything. He doesn't make every decision that Xbox does, right? But he's the leader. It all falls back on him. And he reiterated during the speech that it was unequivocally wrong, unequivocally sexist, and that it was his job, it's the leader's job, to absorb the hit and to be clear about our culture and what it stands for. Now, some people, will say, that's not that big of a deal. It's just women dancing. But when you run that same day a woman in gaming luncheon, and that same night at a party hire scantily clad women to dance around on tables, it's a bad look. It's mixed messaging. How could you do one and have the other? So he took it in stride. He took the blame for it, and he said actually it was actually worse within the company. He got it worse in the company than he did in the press. The third lesson is the growth mindset. Learn from your mistakes, be active readers, focus on learning. And he said one of my biggest areas of being a growth leader is to listen first instead of jumping in with supposed answers. And he also said you need to listen and amplify people who are less willing to speak up. And he said some people are just quieter. Oftentimes the best ideas and solutions come from the quiet ones, which is very true. I'm sure everybody out there knows people who are quiet, who don't speak up very often, and sometimes they might have really good ideas. But then that part of the speech, which I'll include in the link in the description, so you can check it out on IGN, it's 45 minutes long, talked about how Microsoft had to change and what he did as a leader to help change that mindset. And then it went to about the game worlds that people currently play in, like Overwatch, these consistent and persistent worlds where there is a lot of toxicity. Blizzard's trying to change that with their game, but he said that while he's heard a lot of stories that make him feel good about game communities that he helped create, and he gave a story about Ultima, he's also heard plenty of stories of people who don't feel welcomed because of whether it's their sexual preference or their race or their gender or whatever. And personally, I always found that type of chatter in game chat to be disgusting. Anytime I would hear the N-word thrown out or the F-word thrown out or people belittling a woman because she's playing it as, well, quite frankly, disgusting for lack of a better word, it makes me ashamed that those other people call themselves gamer, because I'm a gamer too. I love video games. I love playing games online. I would never think to belittle somebody else based on the color of their skin or their gender. So at times when I heard that stuff, it would make me ashamed to be a gamer. Like, how could somebody think like this? They just want to enjoy their game time. They just want to enjoy playing Halo. They just want to be enjoying playing Gears. They come on and they're just faced with this toxicity, that never-ending toxicity, just for being a little bit different than the majority of people online. And it was quite frankly disgusting. So once Party Chat came to the Xbox, I never went back in the game chat again. I don't miss it at all. In fact, Party Chat is probably my favorite feature of the Xbox, because I don't have to wade into the pools of nonsense that people spew, just hate and vitriol at people that aren't like them in gaming chat. It's disgusting, and I would love for it to be gone. He talked that the creators and world of games need a refresh. He said that toxic communities are a failure on a company's part, and he said toxic behavior doesn't just hurt an individual, it hurts our community. And I think that's true for the most part, because that's how negative stigma spreads about gaming. There's always that negative stigma gaming about, oh, you must be some fat loser in their mom's basement who hates women and all that stuff. It's because the people who get called those names, they go and they tell their friends, and so on and so forth, until there's this stigma attached to gaming itself. That, number one, gaming's for nerds, gaming's for losers, gaming's for virgins. I mean, you've heard it all before. It kind of stems from that. It doesn't really belong there. And some people say, Rand, you're wrong. It's just a little good, shit talking. I'm better than you. I'm gonna kill you. And look, I'm all for a little bit of gaming there, like little talk where it's like, oh man, I'm gonna kill you this game. I'm better. But when it's like, hey, when you use derogatory terms, hateful terms, that's where you cross the line. It shouldn't be allowed. And he ended it with basically saying, what world do you want to build? When you truly design for all, we help make the world equal for all. Now, a lot of people accuse Phil of being politically correct here, using terms like he's splaining and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I think the core message is sound. I liked learning more about what was going on at Xbox at the time, that, Satya came in, how the team was down, and how Phil, wanted to make the team better. And these are the things he had to do it. It's always nice to get a little bit of inside baseball about things that were happening around that time. And then talking about toxicity and how, there's no place for it. And honestly, Phil being the head of Xbox, there's obviously a little bit of business sense to it as well. I mean, you want people to talk good about your product. You want people to go and have a good time on Xbox Live or PlayStation Network, right? So they continue to be on the service, pay for the service, buy games on the service, so you get paid, and then those people go and they tell good things to their friends about this good time they had here and there. Instead of them going saying, well, I went to go play this game and I was called this name, stay away from it, they're all losers. And then that spreads. Of course, there's a little bit of business there as well about making your customers feel safe and happy so they can spend more money on your platform. I mean, it's basic common sense, basic business sense, but I truly think Phil, feels more than just that common business sense that he would like to see the toxic behavior that exists online to just be, for us to just hit refresh and start over anew. But anyways, guys, I really recommend you check this video out for yourself. Really good speech by Phil. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit a like, share it out on Twitter and all that good stuff. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. Hit the notification bell so you're always notified when I drop new videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this video ended up being quite long, but I think it was worth it. And I'll see everybody in the next video. Later, guys.